I'm Ibrahim Traore, and I need to tell you about the hardest thing I've ever done, something that went against every instinct I had as a leader and as someone who values justice. About 2 years ago, I faced a situation that forced me to confront what following Jesus actually means when the cost is real and the stakes are life and death. I'm a leader in my community. I've held positions of responsibility where people's safety and well-being depend on the decisions I make. I came from a military background where I was trained to think strategically, to identify threats and neutralize them, to be strong and decisive. Everything I learned about leadership emphasized strength, the importance of never showing weakness, and dealing firmly with those who would harm your people. About 3 years ago, I became a Christian. It wasn't cultural. I had a genuine encounter with Jesus Christ that transformed my understanding of everything. I got baptized, started attending church, began reading the Bible and praying regularly, but I kept my faith and my leadership responsibilities in separate boxes in my mind. I thought Jesus' teachings about loving enemies and turning the other cheek were beautiful ideals for personal relationships, but surely they couldn't apply to serious leadership situations where real threats existed. That compartmentalization shattered one night when everything changed. I discovered that people I trusted, people close to me in my organization, had been plotting against me, not just disagreeing with my decisions or working to undermine my authority politically, but actively planning to harm me. We found evidence, communications, plans, connections to outside interests who wanted to see me fail. Multiple people were involved, including some I had considered friends, people I had worked alongside for years. When my security team presented all the evidence, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: cold, focused rage. Not the hot anger that makes you yell and lose control, but the ice-cold kind that makes your thinking crystal clear and absolutely merciless. My first thought was immediate: asterisk, I'm going to make sure they understand the consequences of betrayal. Asterisk. This wasn't irrational. In the environment I operate in, showing weakness invites more problems. Being merciful to people who've betrayed trust can encourage others to try the same thing. Every leadership book I'd ever read, every mentor I'd learned from, every successful leader I'd studied, they all said the same thing: deal with threats decisively, make examples when necessary, protect yourself and your organization through strength. My team was already planning next steps: how to confront these people, what consequences to impose, how to send a clear message that this behavior wouldn't be tolerated. Everyone in the room assumed we'd handle this the way any organization would: firmly, decisively, with zero tolerance for betrayal. I approved the plans. I gave instructions about how to proceed. I went home that night feeling justified, even righteous. These people had betrayed not just me personally, but everything we were trying to build together, all the people who depended on us. They deserved what was coming, but I couldn't sleep. I kept seeing their faces, especially one man, let's call him David, who I'd worked with for 8 years. We'd been through difficult situations together. I'd been to his home, knew his family, had celebrated successes together. I'd promoted him based on merit and what I thought was loyalty. The betrayal felt deeply personal in ways that other challenges never had. Around 4 a.m., unable to sleep, I got up and went to my home office. I'd been a Christian for about 18 months at this point, reading the Bible regularly, praying, trying to learn what following Jesus actually meant in practical life. But I'd never really let my faith intersect with how I handled organizational challenges or leadership decisions. I opened my Bible not looking for anything specific, just restless and unable to quiet my mind. It fell open to Matthew chapter 5, the Sermon on the Mount. I read, "You have heard that it was said, 'Love your neighbor and hate your enemy.' But I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you." I actually laughed out loud. Not a happy laugh, a bitter, incredulous one. Asterisk. Love my enemies, pray for people who've betrayed me and worked to harm me. Is this serious? Asterisk. It felt completely disconnected from reality. The kind of teaching that sounds beautiful in church but falls apart when you're dealing with actual betrayal in actual high-stakes situations. I kept reading, getting more frustrated. "You have heard that it was said, eye for eye and tooth for tooth. But I tell you, do not resist an evil person. If anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to them the other cheek also." Asterisk. That's how you get destroyed. Asterisk, I remember thinking. Asterisk. That's how good organizations fail, and people who don't respect boundaries take advantage. This can't possibly apply to leadership situations. Asterisk. I was about to close the Bible and go back to planning consequences when I felt something stop me, not physically, but spiritually. I felt a presence, like suddenly I wasn't alone anymore, like Jesus himself was in the room asking me to really understand what I was reading. And I heard in my spirit clearly, "Ibrahim, do you trust me or not? Do you follow me or not? You cannot say you're my follower while handling betrayal and conflict using only worldly wisdom. Forgiveness isn't optional if you're going to follow me, it's central. If you want to lead with my authority, you must forgive as I forgave. I spoke out loud to the empty room, my voice shaking, but they betrayed me. They were working against everything we're building. Don't they deserve consequences? The presence didn't leave. The sense of Jesus being there intensified, and I heard, I know what they deserve. I also know what you deserve. I died for you while you were still my enemy, Ibrahim. I forgave the people who crucified me while they were doing it. Now I'm asking you to forgive not because they deserve it, but because you follow me. I broke down. Just completely fell apart emotionally. I'd been carrying so much pressure, so many responsibilities, so much weight of leadership. And now this, being asked to forgive people who had betrayed my trust, to show mercy when everything in my training and experience screamed that mercy would be seen as weakness. I wept for probably 30 minutes, arguing with God, begging for a different way, trying to negotiate. What if I just don't retaliate harshly? What if I handle it professionally but firmly? Isn't that enough? Do I really have to forgive them in my heart? But I kept feeling this unshakable conviction. Forgiveness wasn't up for negotiation, not whether there would be organizational consequences, that was a separate question. But the heart attitude of forgiveness, of releasing them from the personal debt they owed me, of genuinely desiring their good instead of their suffering, this was what Jesus was demanding. Here's what I learned in those pre-dawn hours that nobody had told me about forgiveness. It's not a feeling. I kept waiting to times feel times forgiving, to times feel times merciful, to stop wanting them to face consequences. Those feelings never came. Instead, forgiveness is a decision you make despite your feelings, a choice to release someone from what they owe you even though everything in you wants payment. As the sun started rising, I made a decision. I didn't feel good about it. I didn't feel holy or righteous or Christ-like. I felt like I was about to make a leadership mistake that might damage my credibility and the organization's stability. But I decided to obey Jesus regardless of how it felt or what the consequences might be. I called my security coordinator that morning. I need to change how we're handling the situation. I said, we're still going to address it, but differently than we planned. I want to handle this with integrity and dignity for everyone involved, not with retaliation or harsh punishment designed to send a message. The silence told me he thought I was making a mistake. Sir, with respect, this is a serious breach of trust that requires a firm response. I know what you think it requires, I said. I'm telling you how we're going to do it. We'll address the situation. There will be consequences. But we're going to handle it in a way that maintains everyone's dignity and doesn't turn this into something vindictive. After hanging up, I did something that felt even stranger. I prayed for them, each person involved, by name. Not some vague bless them prayer, but specific. God, I pray for David. I pray you would help him understand what he's done and lead him to genuine repentance. I pray you would protect his family who are going to be affected by this situation. I pray you would somehow redeem this mess and use it for good. I won't lie, praying that prayer felt like torture. Every word fought me. Every name triggered anger again. But I pushed through because Jesus had asked me to, and at that point, exhausted and emotionally raw, I was choosing obedience over my own wisdom. The confrontations happened. Consequences were implemented. People were removed from positions of trust. Responsibilities were reassigned. Relationships were restructured. But it was done without vindictiveness, without public shaming, without the kind of harsh example making that my instincts had initially demanded. My team thought I was being too soft. I heard murmurs that I was losing my edge, that I was too idealistic to handle serious organizational challenges. Some people questioned whether I had what it took to lead effectively if I couldn't be ruthless when necessary. 3 days after addressing the situation, I did something I'd never done before. I asked for a private meeting with David, the person whose betrayal had hurt most personally. My team tried to talk me out of it, but I insisted. I needed to look him in the eyes. I needed to test whether this forgiveness I'd chosen was real or just spiritual theater. We met in a private office. When he came in, he looked defensive and afraid, expecting confrontation, probably expecting me to lay into him about his betrayal. We sat across from each other, and I could see the tension in his body. Why? I asked him simply. He was quiet for a long moment, then said, "You wouldn't understand. Try me." He looked down. I disagreed with how things were being handled. I thought you were making mistakes, taking risks that weren't necessary. Others felt the same way. We thought we were protecting the organization by working to change leadership. I know how it looks now, but at the time we convinced ourselves we were doing the right thing. I felt anger rising not at the betrayal now, but at the self-deception in it. He'd convinced himself that working against me was noble, that betrayal was actually loyalty to some higher purpose. It was the kind of rationalization that makes all betrayal possible. But alongside the anger, I felt something unexpected: pity. This man had damaged his integrity, his reputation, his relationships, all while telling himself he was doing something good. He'd destroyed his own character while believing he was protecting the organization. "David," I said quietly, "I didn't ask for this meeting to attack you or to make you feel worse. I asked for it because I need to tell you something. I forgive you." He looked shocked, then suspicious. "What do you mean?" "I mean exactly what I said. You betrayed my trust, you worked against me, you violated the loyalty we built over 8 years of working together. And I forgive you for all of it." David stared at me like I'd lost my mind. "Forgive me? But there are still consequences, right? I'm still losing my position?" This is where I had to figure out in real time what forgiveness actually means in organizational contexts, because here's what nobody explains clearly. Forgiveness and accountability are not opposites. They're actually partners. Yes, there are organizational consequences. I told him, "You violated trust in ways that make it impossible for you to continue in your current role. That's not punishment, that's just reality. Trust, once broken at this level, can't be restored quickly or easily. What I'm forgiving is the personal debt you owe me, the betrayal of our friendship, the breach of the relationship we'd built. I'm releasing you from that debt in my heart. I'm choosing not to hate you, not to want you to suffer beyond what's necessary for organizational integrity. I'm even praying for your future and your redemption." He looked confused. "So forgiveness doesn't mean everything goes back to normal?" "No," I said. "Forgiveness means I release you from the emotional debt. It means I'm not going to carry hatred or bitterness. It means I genuinely hope you learn from this and find a good path forward. But it doesn't mean I pretend nothing happened or that I ignore the reality of who you've proven yourself to be in this situation. Forgiveness isn't the same as trust. Trust has to be rebuilt over time through changed behavior." The conversation lasted about 20 minutes. David never fully apologized or took complete responsibility. He kept trying to explain his motivations, to make it seem less bad than it was. But something shifted in me during that conversation. The burning anger I'd felt was cooling into something different, not friendship, not trust, but a kind of released indifference. He no longer had power over my emotions. I genuinely let go of the debt he owed me. Over the following weeks, I had similar conversations with others who'd been involved. Same message: I forgive you, there are still organizational consequences, and I'm genuinely hoping for your redemption and growth. Their responses varied. One person broke down and showed genuine remorse, which was actually harder to witness because now I was forgiving someone who understood the full weight of what they'd done. 2 others remained somewhat defensive. Several seemed unable to fully process what forgiveness meant. But here's the critical thing I learned. Forgiving someone doesn't mean trusting them again. This is where many people get confused about forgiveness. I genuinely forgave David. I released him from the personal debt. I stopped wanting him to suffer. I prayed for his good. But I would never put him in a position of trust again, at least not without years of demonstrated change. Some people hear forgiveness and think it means restoring the relationship to what it was before. That's not forgiveness, that's foolishness. Forgiveness means you stop demanding payment for the wrong done to you. It means you release the person from your internal hostage-taking. It means you genuinely want their ultimate well-being, even if you can never have the same relationship with them again. But it doesn't mean you ignore reality or put yourself in position to be hurt the same way again. My security coordinator understood this better than some of my spiritual mentors initially did. When I explained that I'd forgiven the people involved, but we still had to restructure authority and implement new safeguards, he nodded. That makes sense. Forgiveness is what happens in your heart. Organizational security is what happens in the real world. Both can be true at the same time. The situation was resolved. People moved on to other roles. The organization stabilized. But the conspiracy wasn't my hardest test of forgiveness. That came about 5 months later. Someone I had helped early in my career, let's call him Marcus, someone I had mentored, advocated for, and supported through difficult times, publicly attacked me. Not just criticism or disagreement, which would have been fine, but a coordinated campaign designed to destroy my reputation and damage the work I was doing. He spread lies, distorted past events, recruited others to join his attacks, and did it all while claiming he was exposing my failures and protecting people from my leadership. This felt worse than the conspiracy in some ways. The conspirators had at least been somewhat honest about their opposition. Marcus was pretending to be righteous, acting like his attacks were noble, positioning himself as a hero, exposing a villain. And it was working people who didn't know the full story were believing him. My reputation was being damaged, and the work I was doing was being undermined. I wanted to fight back. I wanted to expose his lies publicly, to show everyone what he was really doing, to destroy his credibility the way he was trying to destroy mine. I had receipts, emails, messages, evidence that would show his accusations were false and his motivations were not what he claimed. My team was preparing a comprehensive response that would devastate his position. But then, late one night as I was reviewing the response we'd prepared, I felt that same presence again. Jesus, asking me, will you forgive him? This is different, I said out loud. He's lying about me. He's attacking my character publicly. People believe him. I have the right to defend myself. And I heard, I know he's lying. I know it's unfair. I was lied about too. They said I was possessed by demons, that I was a blasphemer, that I was leading people astray. I could have defended myself, could have called down angels to vindicate me, but I chose a different path. I forgave them. I'm asking you to do the same. But if I don't defend myself, he wins. The lies will stand. My work will be damaged. Do you trust me to defend you? Or do you only trust me when you're also defending yourself? Ibrahim, I'm not asking you to let injustice stand forever. I'm asking you to release Marcus from your hatred and to trust me with your reputation. Respond to lies with truth, yes. But do it without venom, without the goal of destroying him. Do it to clarify reality, not to get revenge. I wrestled with this for days. Everything in me wanted to obliterate Marcus's credibility, to make him pay for what he was doing. But I kept feeling that conviction. Forgive him, trust God with your reputation, respond with truth, but not with vengeance. So we did respond, but differently than I'd initially planned. We corrected the specific lies with evidence, calmly and factually. We didn't attack Marcus personally or try to destroy his character. We didn't recruit others to our side or try to isolate him. We simply stated truth and then let it go. Trusted that over time, truth would become clear to people who were willing to see it. And I forgave Marcus. This was even harder than forgiving the conspirators because his attacks were ongoing, public, and effective. Every day there would be new accusations, new attempts to damage my reputation, and every day I had to choose again to forgive, to release him from the debt, to pray for him instead of cursing him. People thought I was weak for not fighting back harder. Some supporters felt like I was letting them down by not defending our work more aggressively. But something unexpected happened over time. Most people saw through Marcus's attacks. The truth became clear not because I fought desperately to expose him, but because truth has a weight to it that lies don't. People who were genuinely interested in reality eventually saw it. People who wanted to believe the lies believed them regardless of what I said. And Marcus? About a year later, he reached out indirectly through a mutual acquaintance. He wanted to apologize. When we eventually spoke, he said, I was hurt by something that happened years ago that had nothing to do with you, and I projected that hurt onto you. I convinced myself you represented everything wrong with leadership, everything that had hurt me. I'm seeing a counselor now, working through my issues. I need to apologize for the damage I caused. I forgave him again, since I'd already forgiven him months earlier. But this time he knew it, and it meant something to him. We didn't become close friends again, but we found a respectful distance that allowed both of us to move forward. The hardest test of forgiveness came about a year after my initial experience with the conspirators. This one didn't involve betrayal by people close to me. It involved harm to people I cared about by forces beyond my immediate control. There was a situation, I'll spare you the details to protect people's privacy, where decisions made by authorities outside my control resulted in serious harm to people in my community. Not negligence, but what appeared to be deliberate choices that prioritized other interests over the well-being of vulnerable people. The consequences were devastating. People suffered, families were damaged, and I was powerless to prevent it. This was different from forgiving personal betrayal. Those situations were about me, my hurt, my reputation, my organizational relationships. This was about justice for people who couldn't defend themselves, protection for vulnerable people who depended on leaders to care about their well-being. I wanted those authorities to face consequences. I wanted them to be held accountable, to understand the suffering their decisions had caused. I wanted justice, and my anger felt completely righteous because it wasn't about me. It was about innocent people who'd been harmed. I spent days in prayer, wrestling with God about this. I searched scripture, looking for permission to pursue justice aggressively, for some exception to the forgiveness mandate when powerful people harm vulnerable people. What I found instead was Romans 12:19-1. Do not take revenge, my dear friends, but leave room for God's wrath, for it is written, "It is mine to avenge. I will repay," says the Lord. On the contrary, if your enemy is hungry, feed him. If he is thirsty, give him something to drink. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. I argued, this isn't about personal revenge. This is about justice for people who were harmed. There's a difference. But I kept feeling the conviction. Forgiveness is not optional. Vengeance belongs to God. Trust him with justice. Here's what I finally understood. Forgiveness doesn't mean passivity. It doesn't mean allowing harm to continue. It doesn't mean I couldn't advocate for the vulnerable or work to prevent future harm. What it meant was that my pursuit of justice had to be motivated by love for those who were harmed, not hatred for those who caused harm. It had to be proportionate, focused on stopping harm and creating accountability, not on punishment that satisfied my anger. So we responded, but from a foundation of forgiveness rather than vengeance. We documented what had happened carefully. We advocated for the people who'd been harmed. We pushed for changes that would prevent similar situations. We held authorities accountable through appropriate channels. But we did it without hatred, without a vindictive desire to see people destroyed, without losing our own integrity in the pursuit of justice. And I forgave the people responsible not by excusing what they'd done, not by minimizing the harm, but by releasing them from my personal anger and trusting God to handle ultimate justice. I prayed for them that they would understand what they'd done, that they would change, that somehow good might come even from this terrible situation. People thought I was failing the vulnerable by not being more aggressive. Some felt I was betraying the people who'd been harmed by forgiving those responsible. There were difficult conversations where I had to explain that pursuing justice and choosing forgiveness aren't opposites, that you can do both simultaneously if you understand them correctly. What I learned through these experiences has completely changed how I understand leadership, power, and what it means to follow Jesus in practical life situations. Let me share the key lessons. Asterisk. First, forgiveness is primarily for you, not for the person you're forgiving. Asterisk. Unforgiveness is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to suffer. It eats you up internally, consumes your mental and emotional energy, distorts your judgment, and makes you increasingly bitter. When I forgave the conspirators, when I forgave Marcus, when I forgave the authorities who'd harmed people I cared about, they didn't immediately change, though some eventually did. But I changed. I was freed from the emotional prison that unforgiveness creates. I could think clearly again, lead effectively again, sleep at night again. Asterisk. Second, forgiveness doesn't erase consequences. Asterisk. This is crucial and often misunderstood. People sometimes think forgiveness means letting someone off the hook, pretending nothing happened, or avoiding accountability. That's not biblical forgiveness. Every person I forgave still faced consequences, organizational, relational, sometimes legal. Justice happened. But it happened without me being twisted up inside with bitterness. I could let accountability processes work without my emotions, demanding vengeance beyond what was just. Asterisk. Third, forgiveness is a process, not a single moment. Asterisk. I had to choose forgiveness repeatedly, especially early on when my emotions kept pulling me back toward anger and resentment. Every time something reminded me of the betrayal, every time I saw the ongoing effects of harm that had been caused, every time someone brought up the situations I had to re-choose forgiveness. It got easier over time as the choice became more established in my heart, but it was never automatic or effortless. Asterisk. Fourth, forgiveness doesn't require reconciliation or restoration of relationship. Asterisk. This is where many people get confused. I forgave David, but we will never work together closely again. That's appropriate, not a failure of forgiveness. Forgiveness is unilateral. You can do it regardless of whether the other person repents, changes, or even acknowledges they're wrong. Reconciliation is bilateral. It requires both parties and requires the offender to demonstrate genuine change over time. You can forgive without reconciling, and sometimes that's exactly what wisdom requires. Asterisk. Fifth, real forgiveness is supernatural. Asterisk. I'm convinced that deep, genuine forgiveness, especially of serious wrongs, is impossible without God's help. My natural inclination was toward self-protection, anger, and demanding justice. Every human instinct pulled me toward retaliation. The only reason I was able to forgive was because Jesus commanded it and then supernaturally enabled it through His Spirit working in me. When I prayed for my enemies, the words came from my mouth, but the grace behind them came from God. Asterisk, asterisk, sixth. Forgiveness doesn't mean you become passive about evil. Asterisk, asterisk, this was one of my biggest fears initially, that forgiving would make me weak, unable to protect people or oppose injustice. But I found the opposite was true. When you're not consumed by personal hatred and a need for revenge, you can actually oppose wrongdoing more effectively. You're clear-headed, strategic, motivated by love for victims rather than obsessed with punishing perpetrators. You can be absolutely firm in your opposition to harmful behavior while remaining compassionate toward the humanity of people caught up in harmful patterns. Asterisk, asterisk. Seventh, forgiveness creates space for transformation. Asterisk, asterisk. This was the most surprising discovery. When I held on to unforgiveness, I was locked in a rigid stance toward the people who'd wronged me. They were villains, enemies, people to be opposed, and kept at distance. But when I forgave, it created space for them to change, if they chose to, for relationships to evolve, for unexpected redemption. David eventually did significant work on himself and became a healthier leader in a different context. Marcus got help for the issues driving his attacks and found healing. The authorities who'd made harmful decisions, that's still unfolding, but there have been some positive changes. I'm often asked now, especially by other leaders, how do you balance forgiveness with leadership responsibility? How do you forgive harmful people while also protecting the people in your care? Here's my answer. They're not in tension if you understand them correctly. Leadership absolutely requires you to oppose harmful behavior, to protect vulnerable people, to pursue justice, to create accountability systems. But leadership doesn't require hatred. It doesn't require a desire for vengeance. It doesn't require dehumanizing people who've done wrong. The most effective leaders I've observed are those who can be absolutely firm in opposing harmful actions while remaining compassionate toward the flawed human beings taking those actions. They fight injustice without becoming unjust themselves. They protect their people without losing their own souls in the process. They pursue accountability without pursuing revenge. This isn't weakness, it's actually much harder than simple retaliation. It's easier to hate than to forgive. It's easier to dehumanize opponents than to recognize their humanity while still opposing their actions. It's easier to seek revenge than to pursue measured justice. Let me tell you about a moment that crystallized all of this for me. About 2 years after these events began, I was speaking at a community gathering. During the Q&A, a young woman stood up and said, "Mr. Traoré, I heard you talk about forgiveness, but I was hurt badly by someone in a position of authority, not you, someone else. They haven't apologized. They haven't changed. They're still in their position doing the same things. How can I forgive when there's been no justice?" I thought carefully before responding. "That's the hardest kind of forgiveness," I said. "When there's been no apology, no change, no consequences that you can see." Here's what I've learned. Forgiveness doesn't mean you're okay with what happened. It doesn't mean you stop working for justice and accountability. It means you release the person from your internal court, where you're the judge and jury replaying the offense over and over. You hand them over to God's court, trusting that ultimate justice is in His hands, not yours. But practically, I continued, that means you stop letting them occupy your emotional energy. You stop rehearsing what you wish you'd said. Stop fantasizing about them, finally understanding and apologizing. Stop waiting for your healing to begin only after they've been punished. You start healing now, without needing their participation. That's what forgiveness gives you, the freedom to heal and move forward whether or not they ever change. She was quiet, tears in her eyes. Then she said, "That sounds impossible." "It is impossible," I agreed, "without God's help." That's why prayer is so essential. You have to pray daily, sometimes hourly. "God, help me forgive. I can't do this on my own. Give me the grace to release this person from my anger." And slowly, over time, maybe months, maybe longer, the grip of unforgiveness loosens. You find yourself thinking about it less. The anger loses its intensity. You discover you can mention the person's name without feeling that spike of rage. That's how you know forgiveness is taking root. After the event, she came up to me. "Thank you," she said simply. I thought forgiveness meant I was weak, or that I was betraying myself by not holding on to my anger. But the way you described it, it sounds like freedom. Like strength, not weakness. "It is strength," I told her. "It takes far more strength to forgive than to hate. Anyone can hold a grudge. It takes supernatural power to release someone who's hurt you deeply." Now, several years after these experiences began, I can honestly say that choosing forgiveness was one of the best leadership decisions I've ever made. Not because it felt good, it rarely did, especially at first. Not because it was easy, it was excruciating. Not even because it led to reconciliation, in most cases it didn't, but because it freed me to lead with clarity, to pursue justice without corruption, to maintain my own integrity while holding others accountable. I've learned that you can be both strong and forgiving. You can pursue justice while releasing personal vengeance. You can protect people while praying for those who've harmed them. These things aren't contradictory, they're actually complementary when you understand them through the lens of Jesus' teaching. The final thing I want to say is this. If you're struggling to forgive someone, you're not alone. Forgiveness is one of the hardest things Jesus asks of us. It goes against every natural instinct of self-protection and justice, but it's also one of the most liberating practices he offers us. You don't have to feel forgiving to choose forgiveness. You don't have to wait until you're not angry anymore. You don't have to have all your emotions in perfect order. You just have to make the choice. I release this person from the debt they owe me. I hand them over to God's justice. I choose to pray for their good, even if it doesn't feel natural yet. And then you make that choice again tomorrow, and the next day, and the day after that. Eventually, the choice becomes easier. The anger loosens its grip. The bitterness fades. You discover you're free not because the wrong was erased, not because justice was fully served, but because you're no longer enslaved to unforgiveness. I still face situations regularly where I have to choose forgiveness. Leadership involves constant opportunities for offense, betrayal, and disappointment. But now I know how to respond. I know that forgiveness isn't weakness, it's wisdom. I know that releasing people from my internal court doesn't mean they escape accountability. It means I trust God's justice more than my own. I know that I can't follow Jesus faithfully while holding on to unforgiveness, no matter how justified that unforgiveness might feel. Jesus asked me to forgive my enemies, and I did it. Not perfectly, not easily, but genuinely. And it changed everything. Not just my leadership, but my soul. That's what forgiveness does. It changes you from the inside out, freeing you to become the person God created you to be, unencumbered by the weight of anger and bitterness. If Jesus is asking you to forgive someone today, I want to encourage you. Obey him. It will cost you something, it will be hard. But what you gain, the freedom, the peace, the clarity, is worth far more than what it costs. Forgiveness is the path to life, even when it feels like death. Trust Jesus with this. He knows what he's asking, and he'll give you the strength to do it.